In today's lesson, we're going to solve two-step equations. This is lesson 2.2. The standard is 8EE7, 8EE7A, 8EE7B. The objective is to solve two-step equations, and the essential question is what is equivalence? Steps in solving two-step equations. Step 1. Remove the constant that's on the same side of the equation as a variable by adding or subtracting. Step 2. Remove the coefficient by multiplying or dividing. Example 1. Solve. 3x plus 2 equals 20. I need to get the variable alone. So in order to do that, I need to move the 2 to the other side. So since it's positive 2, I'm going to do the exact opposite, which is subtract 2 from both sides. So 2 minus 2 gives me 0, so those cancel out. I'm going to bring down my 3x equals 20 take away 2 is 18. Now I notice that 3 times x is multiplication, so I'm going to do the exact opposite, which is division. So I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides. 3 divided by 3 cancels out because that becomes 1. I'm going to be left with x equals 18 divided by 3 gives me 6. I always want to go back and check my work. So I'm going to plug 6 back into the original equation. So it'll be 3 times 6 plus 2 equals 20. So 3 times 6 I know gives me 18. Bring down my 2 and the equals 20. So 18 plus 2 gives me 20 equals 20. So it checks. So I know I did it correct. So x will equal 6. Example 2. Solve. 5 plus 2n equals negative 1. I need to get my variable alone, so I need to move the constant, which is 5, to the other side. So I know that 5 is positive, so I need to do the exact opposite, which is subtract 5 from both sides. This will cancel out. I'll be left with 2n equals negative 1 plus negative 5 is negative 6. So I know 2 times n is being multiplied, so I'm going to go ahead and do the exact opposite, which is division. So I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides. 2 divided by 2 cancels out because that is just 1. I'll be left with n equals negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. So n equals negative 3. Again, I need to check my work, so I'm going to plug negative 3 in back into the original equation. So 5 plus 2 times negative 3 equals negative 1. So 5 plus 2 times negative 3. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. I'm going to bring the 5 down, equals negative 1. So 5 minus 6 is negative 1, which equals negative 1. So this checks. So n equals negative 3 is correct. Example 3. Solve. Negative 1 equals 1/2 a plus 9. I know that I need to get my variable alone, so I need to move the 9 to the other side. So since I have positive 9, I'm going to subtract 9 from both sides, because that's the opposite. So 9 take away 9 gives me 0, so that cancels out. I'm going to bring everything else down. Negative 1 plus a negative 9 gives me a negative 10 equals 1/2 a. I notice that I have one fraction, so I'm going to multiply the whole equation by my LCD. So my LCD is the denominator that I see, which is 2, because it's only one fraction. I'm going to multiply the whole thing by 2, or 2 over 1. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute to the first term and the second term. So negative 10 times 2 gives me negative 20. 2 times 1 gives me 2. 2 times 1 gives me 2. And I'm going to bring down my a. So now I'm going to go ahead and divide. So I'm bringing down negative 20. And then 2 divided by 2 cancels out. And then I just bring down my a. So a equals negative 20. However, I need to still go back and check my work, so I'm going to plug it into the original equation. So negative 1 equals 1/2, and I know that a is supposed to be negative 20 plus 9. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply that out. So I have negative 1 equals, I'm going to make my 20 into a fraction by putting a 1 underneath it. So 1 times negative 20 gives me negative 20. 2 times 1 gives me 2 plus 9. So now I'm going to go ahead and divide. So I have negative 1 equals negative 20 divided by 2 gives me negative 10 plus 9. So I'm going to go ahead and bring down my negative 1 equals negative 10 plus 9 gives me negative 1. So negative 1 does equal negative 1, so it does check. So A does equal negative 20. Example 4. Solve. 2 over 5r minus 5 equals 7. I need to get my variable alone, so I need to move the 5 to the other side. I notice that my 5 is negative, so the opposite of that is positive, so I'm going to add 5 to both sides. 5 take away 5 is 0, so it cancels out. I'm going to bring down 2 over 5r equals 7 plus 5 gives me 12. So now I need to find my LCD. I'm going to multiply the whole thing by my lowest common denominator, which is 5 because there's only one fraction. So I'm going to multiply by 5 over 1. So it's going to be distributed with the first term and the second term. So 5 times 2 gives me 10. 5 times 1 gives me 5. I'm going to bring down my r equals 12 times 5 gives me 60. So now I'm going to divide. 10 divided by 5 is 2. Bring down my r equals 60. Since 2 is being multiplied by r, I'm going to do the exact opposite, which is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. 2 divided by 2 cancels out. I'll be left with just r. And then 60 divided by 2 equals 30. Now I need to go back to the original equation, plug it back in to make sure that I did this correctly. So I'm going to write down 2 over 5. R is supposed to be 30 minus 5 equals 7. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply. I'm going to make my 30 into a fraction by putting a 1 underneath. 2 times 30 gives me 60 divided by 5, because 5 times 1 gives me 5, minus 5 equals 7. So now I'm going to divide. 60 divided by 5 gives me 12, minus 5 equals 7. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract. 12 take away 5 gives me 7 equals 7. So it is correct. It checks. So my answer is R equals 30. Example 5. Solve. 10 minus 2 over 3p equals 52. I need to get my variable alone, so I need to move the 10 to the other side. So since 10 is positive because there's nothing in front of it, I need to do the exact opposite. So I'm going to subtract by 10 on both sides. 10 minus 10 cancels out. Minus 2 over 3p comes down equals 52 minus 10 gives me 42. Now I'm going to go ahead and multiply by my LCD. My LCD is 3 because there's only one fraction, and that's my denominator. So I'm going to multiply the whole thing by 3, or 3 over 1. I'm going to distribute to my first term and my second term. So negative 2 times 3 gives me negative 6. 3 times 1 gives me 3. Bring down my p equals 42 times 3 gives me 126. Now I'm going to go ahead and divide. Negative 6 over 3 gives me negative 2p equals 126. I'm going to go ahead and divide because 2 is being multiplied by p. The opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. And then I'm going to go ahead and divide. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 cancels out. I'll be left with P equals 126 divided by negative 2 gives me negative 63. I'm going to plug that back into my original equation. So I have 10 minus 2 over 3 times negative 63 equals 52. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply. I'm going to bring down my 10. Negative times a negative gives me a positive. I'm going to make 63 into a fraction by putting 1 under it. So 2 times 63 will give me 126. 3 times 1 gives me 3 equals 52. I'm going to go ahead and divide. I'm going to bring down my 10 first. Plus 126 divided by 3 gives me 42 equals 52. I'm going to go ahead and add 10 plus 42 gives me 52 equals 52. So that does check. So P does equal negative 63. Example 6. Solve. Negative 19 equals negative 3x plus 2. I need to get my variable alone, so I need to move that 2 to the other side. So since 2 is positive, I need to do the exact opposite. So I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. So 2 minus 2, that cancels out. I'm going to bring down negative 3x. And then I have negative 19 plus negative 2 gives me a negative 21. I notice that 3 is being multiplied by x, so I'm going to go ahead and do the opposite of that, which is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 3. So when I divide negative 3 divided by negative 3, that gives me a positive 1. They just cancel out. So x is going to give me negative 21 divided by negative 3 gives me a positive 7. So x should be 7. However, I need to go back and check my work to make sure I did it correctly. So I'm going to plug 7 into the original equation. So I have negative 19 equals negative 3 times 7 plus 2. I'm going to go ahead and combine my terms. So I have negative 19 equals negative 3 times 7 gives me negative 21 plus 2. So I have negative 19 equals negative 21 plus 2 gives me negative 19. So it does check. So x does equal 7. Example 7. Cassidy went to the movies with some of her friends. The tickets cost $6.50 each, and they spent $17.50 on snacks. The total amount paid was $63. Solve the equation 63 equals 6.50p plus 17.50 to determine how many people went to the movies. So first I'm going to rewrite my equation. 63 equals 6.50p plus 17.50. I need to get my variable alone. So in order to do that, I need to move 17.50 to the other side. I notice that it's positive, so I need to do the exact opposite, which is negative. So I'm going to subtract 17.50 from both sides. So 17.50 minus 17.50 cancels out. $63 minus 17.50 will give me 45.50. Equals, I'm going to bring down 6.50 p. Since 6.50 is next to p, that means they're being multiplied together. The opposite of multiplication is division, so I'm going to divide both sides by 6.50. So 6.50 divided by 6.50, that will cancel out. I'm going to bring my p down, equals 45.50 divided by 6.50 gives me 7. So p equals 7. However, I am not certain that it's correct, so I'm going to go ahead and plug it back into the original equation. So I have 63 equals 6.50 times 7 plus 17.50. I'm going to go ahead and multiply. So I have 63 that I'm going to bring down. 6.50 times 7, it's going to give me 45.50 plus 17.50. I'm going to add those together. So I'm going to bring down 63 equals 45.50 plus 17.50 gives me 63. So it does check. So that means that P does equal 7. That means that there is 7 people who went to the movies. And that is my answer.